Hi, I'm Matthew Ecott, and this is Dan Sion, and we're from Premier Equipment in the Cortland location. We're going to go over this 9870 for pre-trip for grain harvest. Hi, we're going to talk about the beginning of the combine a little bit, where we need to make adjustments for grain harvest. Up here at the feeder house drum, you're going to make sure that you have the correct setting on your feeder house drum height. And that adjusts the slack conveyor in relation to the floor. And you accomplish this by adjusting this lever here. You want to make sure you run the feeder house position drum down. Moving on, you want to make sure you adjust the correct feeder house speed, and it is accomplished by moving this chain from the small sprocket to the big sprocket. The big sprocket is your fast speed, and the small sprocket is your slow speed. You accomplish that by removing this nut, which is your tension, and adjusting this up to the middle position. The top position is where you make the adjustment, and then this is for your big sprocket, and then the bottom one is for your small sprocket. Then correctly adjust the chain tension with this one. You want your chain tension to come up just so it touches the slats. You don't want it too loose where it will sag down on the back. You just want it to kind of ride along and not too tight. Moving on, check out your feeder house slip clutch here. Make sure the nuts are not coming loose. Make sure you grease these points when pre-harvest. Next, you have your feed accelerator, which you have to adjust the speed for grain, and we recommend running it in high speed for grain. Where you would do that, you adjust this lever here to take the tension off the belt and bringing it down. And then you want to move this belt over, so you want to be on the high sprocket at the top, which this one already is, and you want to be on the low sprocket on the front sheave. And you can see the decal here on the front of the panel indicating what speed is which and where you would like to have it. But recommended is high speed. Then you just put the tension back on with this. Now the other thing is to be critical is to make sure that all your tensions, your gauges here are adjusted correctly. Over here on the right side of the machine, we got a few adjustments. You want to check belt tensions, obviously here. You want to make sure that they are adjusted correctly. This affects your performance. If the belts slip at all, then you're going to have plugging, especially in grain. You want to make sure all your tensions are set correctly. Chain tension right here, you want to make sure that this chain is adjusted correctly. Lubricate it, make sure you use some kind of chain lube on it. You adjust that chain tension, which is a block spacer in the back behind this pulley here, and a 15 mil wrench. These tensions, you want to make sure that they are tensioned correctly as well. That is done right here on this adjustment gauge. Slip clutches, make sure it is functioning. Moving down to the shoe auger belt here. Again, you adjust that here, making sure that the belt's conditions are all good, that you're not going to have any breaking. This is a very critical belt, and you do not want that to break. Grease points in the clutches here. This is for your variable speed fan. You want to make sure that you have this greased well, and that your sheaves are moving in or out. This is accomplished by adjustment in the cab. Just a general go over, make sure your bearings are all good in here, kind of a visual inspection on this area. here over on the right-hand side, we have what we call the clean grain elevator and the tailings elevator. This is probably your most crucial part of your combine because it carries the clean grain all the way up to the top of the bin, and your tailings is basically your return. So basically you want to have your chain adjusted so that there's no sag on the bottom of it, and just so you can kind of move it back and forth side to side. You don't need that thing fiddle string tight, but just enough to keep that thing from jumping sprockets. Moving over to the tailings, it is the same concept over here. You want to have it tight enough so it's not sagging down, but you want it loose enough so you can move it kind of side to side. Again, just watch for missing or broken pieces like this here that is missing out of it. It kind of affects the performance of how these elevators carry a grain and speed as well.
Hi, I'm Dan Cione with Premier Equipment at Cortland, and there's just a few crop settings I'd like to go over with you here on the this 9870 STS. Go basically just from the feeder house and towards the back of the separator. Matt's already covered the right-hand side, and I'm just going to talk a little bit more about the left-hand side. So first, we want to just make sure that our oil level is topped up in the reverser here. So we want to check it with the feeder house all the way up. Just a 7/8 plug here on the back side, you can see. So just verify that you got oil in there, and I do believe it's HD 460 is what we're looking to put in there. Verify your feeder house drum position is in the down position. So anything for small grains, corn, we always want it in the up position. So we can work our way back here, and we can discuss the concave choices and how to set them up. So right now we were still set up from the following fall harvest here. We have our round bar in here for our soybeans and corn. What we want to do is switch them over to small grain, so we're going to use a small wire concave in there. So every time we swap out our concaves, we want to make sure that we zero the concave and level it. The procedures as in the operator's manual, how to do that. So you want to make sure that everything's adjusted and leveled that way to ensure the best separation, threshing and separation as possible. Make sure that your all of your seals and your panels are installed correctly to avoid any crop loss that way. All of our seals here are intact. We can go over our chains as well here. We want to make sure that we have adequate chain tension, that the chain isn't slapping around in there. We can do that by just adjusting the tensioner accordingly and just being able to move the chain back and forth slightly, but you should feel tension on there on the sprocket itself. Verify all the sprockets are in good working condition, they're not cracked. And then we can, as well here on the separator grates, we have the spacers in here that can be used, mainly used for corn and can be used for soybeans, but we want to remove these spacers, take those out when we switch over to small grains like our rye or wheat. So we want to remove the spacers and tuck the separator grates back up in place. And again, just make sure that we do have the separator doors installed properly to avoid any losses there. So we want to make sure that our rotor is in the correct speed. We want to be in second gear and high speed for the rotor whenever we're doing small grains. So basically it's a matter of just shifting pulling the lever back to shift it. Sometimes you do have to turn the rotor slightly just to get it to engage and lock into gear. Then maybe just run it just and listen for any, if there's any sounds, or make sure nothing's hitting that way. We want to just make sure that we just check our separator tines as well, make sure we don't have any broken tines or threshing elements on the concave. Right now the chopper is set up in windrow position, so that means it is up out of the way, and we do have the chopper drive belt in the stored position here. So it's just a matter of lifting up the chopper and make sure that we do have the belt over top of the sheave and up out of the way. And we just want to make sure that we, nothing obvious here. We do have some lubrication fittings here, so just go over the separator and just make sure that you hit all the grease points. There are legends on the side of the separator, mid-body and on the back, and just service intervals for that. So do make sure they are greased properly. You want to check your tensioners as well. There are gauges. This one here is broken off. I can show you a good example of one, just to make sure that we do tension them correctly. As you can see here, we have our gauge set up right here. So whenever we're tensioning or adjusting a tensioner here, we always want to use this gauge here that's with the combine. You want to make sure that the top of the gauge is flush with the washer. Your adjusting nut you'll see up above here, and your lock nut. So make sure once you have the correct tension set, you just set your lock nut to prevent the tensioner from backing off. This will turn as you're adjusting it, so just try to keep one hand on it as you do dial it into the right position. After that, like I say, tension the jam nut, and just check it periodically throughout the harvest season. So we previously discussed having the chopper in the windrow position with the belt in the storage position. If we're going to chop, we would lower the belt down onto the sheave here to drive the chopper. So if you're going to be chopping, you want to engage your knife. So just loosen off this wing nut slightly. Move the knife into chopping position. And just tighten up the nut good. Also, when you're chopping and spreading, you may have to just alter your vane positioning slightly to obtain the proper spread pattern. And keep in mind, you don't want to spread past the width of your header. So keep that in mind when adjusting your vanes. So that concludes our brief preseason setup for a STS 70 series combine. If you have any other questions, please feel free to contact Premier. We'd be glad to help you. Thank you for your time.